Vinland Saga Season 2 has done the impossible. It took a series that was already a masterpiece and made it so much better. I don't know how they did it, but despite this season having less action, it is actually more entertaining, and I think that comes from the fact that this season is way more character driven than Season 1. Not to say that Season 1 wasn't character driven, because it was, but this season has some of the best character development I have seen in an anime ever. We start this season with Thorfinn being a shell of a man, not really caring about what happens to him. This all happened after the events of Season 1, where he lost his purpose for living. But as the season goes on, he starts to gain his humanity back, all thanks to the help of the best friend in all of fiction, our boy Einar. Vinland Saga Season 2 covers a lot of themes, and one of my favorites is that it covers how impactful friendship can be. Thorfinn at the start of this season is a lonely man who has lost his purpose and is just looking for a place to die. But as he interacts with Einar, he slowly starts to change. Einar is immensely positive. Even when enslaved, he still tries to look at the bright side of every situation. Sure, he can get angry and depressed sometimes as well, but Einar's positivity is one of his strongest and most defining features. As Thorfinn interacts more with Einar, he slowly starts to get his humanity back, because even after Einar learns about Thorfinn's past and sees how it affected him, he doesn't hate Thorfinn, but instead is there to help and support him as a friend. Everyone needs a friend like Einar. He's the kind of guy who may not always agree with everything that you do, but he will certainly always be there to support you as a friend, which I think is what makes him the best of friends you could ever have. And Thorfinn found Einar at just the right moment, where it really made a huge difference in his life and changed him for the better. Thanks to Einar as well, we get a really good mix of lighthearted comedic moments sprinkled in with the darker, more depressing scenes that this season is more focused on. This allows for this season not to feel too depressing and actually makes it a lot easier to watch. It also makes the relationship between Einar and Thorfinn feel much more like a real friendship as well, as they are able to laugh together even through all the hard times, which makes for some really wholesome moments between these two. Seeing the journey that both Thorfinn and Einar take throughout their interactions with each other is awesome and makes you wonder what the future holds for these characters. Alongside the more lighthearted themes like friendship and Einar being a Chad, there are a bunch of darker themes that this series covers, and really well at that. In the earlier episodes, a lot of my favorite scenes were the ones where we see Thorfinn struggling with his past. Thorfinn was very clearly depressed, lonely, and had severe PTSD. And the way that the series tackles each of these things is amazing. Firstly, the PTSD. I love that we get to peek into Thorfinn's mind when he's sleeping, where we get to see all of his nightmares and what he's struggling with. Episode 9 is one of my all-time favorite anime episodes for how it was able to portray this topic really well. The dream he had at the time was a literal hellscape of non-stop violence. It was a horrific scene, but what made that scene so good was two things: Thorfinn's struggle to stay out of it, and Askeladd giving Thorfinn one final push to get him out of this fate. It was an incredible scene that really showed the struggle of a young man overcoming his past with the help of someone who was sort of like a father to him, even if it wasn't in the best ways. The depression is something that is indicated really well in the earlier episodes of the season, through both Thorfinn and Einar. Before meeting Thorfinn and seeing someone worse off than himself, Einar was struggling with having just lost his mother and sister, as well as becoming a slave. And even after meeting Thorfinn, we see him struggle trying to deal with it, and that is why he initially hates Thorfinn for being an ex-warrior. But through his interactions with Thorfinn and his desire to be free again, as well as a little love, he overcomes his depression and actually becomes a better man for it. Thorfinn struggles a lot more throughout the season. His depression is tied with his loneliness and the fact that he has lost his will to live. Thorfinn had lived most of his life up to this point seeking revenge for the death of his father, and now that his target for revenge is gone, he is empty. And that is where we see him at the start of the season. He is a broken man struggling to find a reason for even being around. Seeing Thorfinn struggle to overcome everything makes his character feel so raw and real, while also making his character way more likable. The way Vinland Saga tackles these themes is really well done. It doesn't gloss over any dark emotions, it doesn't try to make it funny, it just feels very real. It is handled with a lot of respect, and you can tell that Yukimura Sensei studied this topic a lot to make sure that it was handled with the utmost care. The impact of war is something that a lot of shows and anime try to tackle, but the way that Vinland Saga does it is really well done. War can affect people in many different ways. Some people are fiends who feed off of war, whether it be they love fighting or through political means. But for the average person who gets caught up in a war, it is a miserable experience, whether you're fighting in it or you have a loved one who is fighting in it. But it also affects those innocent people who are just trying to live their everyday lives. Vinland Saga explores all of these angles through its many different characters. Thorfinn is a man who was dragged into a war at a very young age and has known nothing but fighting ever since he was little. He lost his father and was forced to fight alongside people who didn't care about him. This of course left him with no purpose, but we already talked about that. Einar is a man who lost everything in a war: his home, his father, and eventually his mother and sister, and even his freedom. However, even through all of his grief and hatred, he remains a very kind and admirable man who stands for justice, and is an amazing friend to Thorfinn. On the political side, we have Knut. He has his own trauma that he deals with from war, like how he is haunted by his father who died in a war, but he is also someone who has gained a lot from war. He is the very person that someone like Einar hates. He pillages and destroys towns and villages for his own gain, which has worked wonders on him gaining a lot of political power, but it has also made him a cynical man who couldn't even trust his own brother anymore, so he had him killed. Knut is a man who lost his humanity in war, but on the complete opposite spectrum of how Thorfinn did. This anime handles this theme really well by showing how war affects people on all sides and all types of positions, which is really awesome. One of my favorite themes in season 2 is that loving yourself should always come first. Despite many characters making mistakes, this series likes to focus on the fact that you can always overcome your past by learning to love yourself. Thorfinn has to deal with this when he confronts his past in the early episodes. Canute also has to deal with this, although I don't think he will ever reach the right conclusion. Thorfinn first had to learn to love himself before he can start to learn to love others again. Seeing this take place over the course of the season was awesome and made a lot of what made the show good in the first place so much better. How do you deal with loss? Well, the series explores that topic by having all of the characters experience some kind of loss throughout the show, whether it be in a flashback or present day. It shows us many different ways to deal with loss. Some people give up and accept what fate had in store, others try to fight and overcome their loss, but one thing that never changes is that you will always need someone to help you overcome it. Einar and Thorfinn had each other, but some of the other characters don't have the luxury of having an awesome friend or family member that they can trust and rely on. So what do? Well, you just wallow in sadness until it overtakes you entirely and you end up even more depressed than before. Vinland Saga is an anime that explores many different themes, and loss is one of the most prominent throughout the anime, making it one of the most important to focus on for the characters. Atonement. How do you deal with that when you know you can never be forgiven or when you know that you will always be haunted by your past? Vinland Saga talks a lot about this over the course of its second season. Through the way the story brings up Thorfinn's past to how we see him talk and develop, he is someone who is trying his best to atone for what he has done, but he has no way of really knowing how to do that. So he continues to live his life suffering as that is the least he could do for the lives he has taken, but he doesn't let him get him down anymore. He continues to look for a way to atone for what he has done and has an impossible dream to try to fulfill to make that happen. This series has handled this theme really well by making Thorfinn understand his situation and know that he will never be forgiven, but by still making him try to move forward and try to become a better man. Vinland Saga has done something that not a lot of series can do, and that is handling so many dark themes like atonement, loss, war, suffering, slavery, and a whole lot of more in a very respectful way without the series coming across as preachy or being really boring. Surprisingly, this series also has a massive view on dreams and having your characters believe they can do something. Despite how dark this season and really the show as a whole has been, the series really doesn't shy away from having characters like Thorfinn dream of a better future not just for himself but for others as well. In episode 15, when Thorfinn and Einar were talking about the future and Thorfinn brought up his dream of the future again, it really goes to show you just how much he has grown as a person. That, despite everything he has been through, he is still capable of having such a dream where war and slavery don't exist. This dream is something that will carry him through the rest of the series, I know it. Season 2 has introduced so many amazing characters. From Ketil, the farm owner, who we see as a man with a strong moral compass. Of course, he has his own issues, he owns slaves for one, but he is a man who goes against the system set before him. As a Norseman, he should love fighting in war, but instead he fears it, making his character all the more interesting, especially when he interacts with his sons. Snake is another amazing character. He is the leader of the group guarding the farm. He is an interesting character and I don't know if I love or hate him. He is very complicated, which is a good thing because that makes his character way more realistic. He has to deal with incompetent men who harass people and don't take their jobs seriously, but he also deals with justified but slightly displaced anger over the loss of some of his men. The complexity of his character is what makes him so good. Arnade is another character who I have found to be really well written. At first, she was just a love interest for Einar and another slave who directly served the master. However, she slowly started to be built up into something more. She is someone who has lost a lot because of fighting in war. However, she is trying to make the best of her situation until the past struck her again and made her life even more complicated. She has shown traits of being a strong and capable woman, but she has also shown that she is very broken on the inside. Seeing all of this has made me really like her character in the more recent episodes. Ketil's father in the Old Master is probably my favorite character outside of the main duo for this season. He is a broken man who has already made all of his regrets in life and just wants to live a peaceful life on his farm. He treats everyone, even the slaves, like equals and never looks down on people. He is also someone who has made all of the mistakes that people are going through right now and tries to give advice to them so that they can make the right decisions for their life. He's a strong-willed but kind man who has had a tough life, but he is also one of the best written characters this season because his character arc is already finished. Vinland Saga Season 2 has been an incredible season. There has been so much amazing stuff that has happened this season. It has very quickly climbed the ranks and has easily become one of my favorite anime of all time. There are a lot of people who have called this season boring, and to those people I want to ask, have we been watching the same show? Like, actually, just because this season doesn't have a lot of action in it doesn't mean it's boring. This season far surpasses season 1 in every way by having amazing characters, a complex plot, and some of the best damn music I've ever seen in anime. This season is amazing, and if you think this season is boring, then you have missed the entire point of the show, not just season 2, but season 1 as well. But anyway, Vinland Saga is the GOAT, and if you haven't watched it, then where the hell have you been? Under a rock? Go watch the damn show already.